Happy Sunday, everybody. Steve here. Another, yeah, you guessed it, another sunny day here in Abu Dhabi. So I was reading in the book of Joel, and I wanted to share some things. I was reading through it, and I was thinking back and remembering as a father when my kids were younger, and when they would do things they shouldn't do, and they would act up or whatever, and I would have to call them down, or they get trouble. And I was just as a father. Now Arlene, I will tell you, Arlene is she's tough. She's the kids call her El Tigre. So I guess it should be well, anybody, but I'm not sure the masculine or whatever of that. But she should be. But I mean, she's tough, and I was always, believe it or not, I was. It took a lot more to get me riled up, but when I did, the kids paid attention. So, but I think about that a lot, and there's one particular song. Now Bella always knows this. We go riding in the car now. When all the kids were with us, Nathan was always the DJ. He would play the music, and he had his little iPod or whatever, and he would play the music. And then Bella kind of took that over, and she's pretty good at it. But it's funny. We'll be riding along in the car, and she'll be playing songs, and she always does this. She'll put on this one song that just she knows it always makes me cry. And it's that Tim McGraw song, My Little Girl. And that song just, it gets me. And we'll be riding down the road, and she's sitting in the back seat in the van, and that song will start playing, and I'll just look up in the rearview mirror, and she's just looking up at me just to see. And I'm like, girl. And her brothers go, Bella, why do you want to make Daddy cry all the time? but there's this one part in that song that it just reminded me of this verse I'm going to talk about today in Joel, and it's in the second stanza of it. He says, "When you were in trouble, that crooked little smile could melt my heart of stone." And I think about that, and as a father, how many times when I would, the kids would get to my limit, which wherever that was, way up here, but they would do something. I'm like, all right, that's enough, and they knew, hey, Daddy doesn't say it twice, and they would stop, or. And I was thinking how funny, a lot of times it was the threat of imminent punishment, and it would wake them up. When they would stop. And the funny one I always remember is the old, okay, that's keep it up, and you kind of reach for the belt, and kind of like you're undoing it, and it was like, oh man, better stop. And I think about that, and so in the Old Testament, and you can go and Google, and it'll come up. I'm looking right at it. I Googled Old Testament prophet timeline. And this is really interesting if you look at it, and a lot of the timelines, and some of them the dates are a little squishy, and there's not a whole lot of agreement, but for the most part it's pretty tight. But the picture you see, a lot of the prophets, the Old Testament prophets like Joel and Obadiah and Elijah and Jonah and Amos, Hosea, all of those Old Testament prophets like that were like, you better change your ways or trouble's coming. And you read that and you see that, and of course they didn't listen. And you see that and you think about that, and you're just like, I used to imagine that God was like, just he had his hand just over him, going, you better fix it, or all right, and punishment came swiftly. But if you look at the timeline, and I'm looking right here at it, of course, reading the book of Joel, he's like, you better fix it. And the timeline they have him in is around the that when the Israel had split apart, the northern kingdom was in its heyday, and I mean it was probably 100 years before Assyria came in and carried off the northern kingdom. 100 years. So God's patient and loving, and you know what? So I'm reading this devotional here, and Martin Luther talking about this, and in Joel 2:13, rend your heart. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me read the whole thing, because let's start with 2 verse 12. Even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your heart and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and he relents from sending calamity. Who knows? He may turn and relent and leave behind a blessing, grain offerings and drink offerings for the Lord your God. So that doesn't sound like a God who revels in punishing his children. I think and I think about that like the song. You were in trouble, that crooked little smile, you know. And I think about, you know, the times with the kids, and they would get in trouble, and I got up fully intended to paddle their behind, but they're, I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry. And I'm relented. And I think about that, and I think about the Lord, that he does that, and how many times, Martin Luther talks about that. This is what all the prophets do. They frighten us with the strongest and most severe threats, and they immediately add the greatest promises of mercy and grace of God. That's what God did. He gave them those words, and he says, trouble's coming if you don't change. Change now, like you said, now, even now, as bad as you've been, even now, relent, return to me with all your heart, fasting, weeping, mourning. Be sorry, for what you've done, and I'll forgive you. And that's not a God who has his hand over us to crush us and waiting to crush us like he can't wait. That's not what God, I just don't believe that's the way God is. That's not the way I was as a father, and God is, the Bible teaches us that God is infinitely better than we could ever be as a heavenly Father. So, even talking about that song, I guess, made me tear up. So, I hope you have a great Sunday. I hope this was a blessing to you, and these always are a blessing to me. Think about this. I love it. I love thinking about the Lord and how much he loves us. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.